The judgment. The silence of the council chamber was absolute. 10,000 years of history looked down from the crystalline walls of the Corvathian High Court, where the faces of ancient leaders had been preserved in light itself. High Archon Zelith stood at the center of the circular room, his tall frame casting shadows that seemed to stretch into eternity. His silver robes moved without wind, powered by technology so advanced it appeared as magic. Around him, the 12 members of the Eternal Council waited in their hovering thrones, their expressions unreadable. Before them floated a holographic projection of a small blue planet, spinning slowly in the darkness of space. Earth. The third planet from an unremarkable yellow star in a spiral arm of the galaxy that most civilizations ignored. But the Corvathian Empire ignored nothing. They had explored, catalogued, and monitored every corner of the known universe for longer than most species had existed. Archon Zelith gestured, and the hologram changed. Images flickered through the air, showing humanity's history in rapid succession. Cave paintings gave way to ancient cities. Wooden ships became steel vessels. Horse-drawn carriages transformed into machines that could fly. And then came the weapons. Swords became guns. Guns became bombs. Bombs became missiles tipped with nuclear fire. These creatures, Zelith began, his voice resonating through the chamber like distant thunder, have existed as a technological civilization for less than 10,000 years. In that time, they have waged over 15,000 wars. They have created weapons capable of destroying their own planet multiple times over. They have poisoned their air, their water, and their soil in pursuit of progress. The hologram shifted again, showing footage of human conflicts. Soldiers charging across battlefields. Cities burning under aerial bombardment. Mushroom clouds rising over devastated landscapes. The council members watched in silence, their ancient eyes taking in every detail. And yet, continued another council member, Archon Vayara, her voice carrying the weight of 5,000 years of wisdom, they also create beauty. Art, music, literature that rivals even our own achievements. They have sent messages of peace into the void, hoping to find friends among the stars. Zelith turned to face her, his expression hardening. They send messages of peace while pointing weapons at each other. They speak of unity while their planet remains divided into hundreds of conflicting nations. They dream of exploring the cosmos while they cannot even manage their own world. He paused, letting his words sink in. But most concerning of all, they are advancing at a rate we have never witnessed before. The hologram changed once more, showing a timeline of human technological development. The progression was staggering. What had taken the Corvathians millennia to achieve, humans had accomplished in mere centuries. 50 years ago, they could barely leave their own atmosphere, Zelith continued. Today, they have permanent settlements on their moon and probes exploring their entire solar system. Our projections indicate they will achieve faster-than-light travel within 30 years. Perhaps less. The silence that followed was heavy with implication. Every member of the council understood what that meant. Once humanity reached the stars, they would encounter other civilizations. And given their history of violence and territorial expansion, the result would be catastrophic. We have a responsibility, Zelith said quietly, his voice now carrying a note of sadness. To the 400-member species of our alliance. To the thousands of civilizations under our protection. To the very fabric of galactic peace that we have maintained for 8,000 years. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of each council member. Humanity is a cancer that will spread if we do not act. They must be cleansed before they become an existential threat to everything we have built. The vote was called. One by one, the council members raised their hands. The decision was unanimous. Earth would be sterilized. Its population eliminated. Its potential snuffed out before it could endanger the galaxy. Far below the council chamber, in the research districts of the Corvathian capital world, Dr. Methra sat in her laboratory surrounded by screens displaying everything humanity had ever broadcast into space. She had spent 30 years studying these strange creatures, learning their languages, watching their civilization evolve. She had laughed at their comedies, wept at their tragedies, and marveled at their capacity for both cruelty and compassion. When the announcement came through the official channels, her hands began to shake. The Armada was being mobilized. 5,000 warships, each one capable of destroying a planet single-handedly. They would reach Earth in 96 hours. And humanity would die without ever knowing why. Methra stood and walked to her window, looking up at the stars beyond the atmospheric shield. Somewhere out there, 8 billion human beings were going about their lives, completely unaware that their entire species had been condemned to extinction. Children were playing. Artists were creating. Scientists were discovering. Lovers were embracing. And in 4 days, all of it would end in fire. She thought about the stories she had read. The human legends of heroes who stood against impossible odds. The tales of last stands and desperate battles. The poems about defiance in the face of certain death. Humans had a phrase they used often in their fiction, rage against the dying of the light. Methra made her decision. She walked to her communication console and began composing a message. What she was about to do would end her career, possibly her life. The Corvathian Empire did not tolerate treason. But she could not stand by and watch an entire species die without giving them a chance to fight back. The message contained everything. The size and composition of the Armada. The weapons they carried. The shields that protected them. The tactics they would use. She included technical specifications, energy frequencies, and weaknesses in Corvathian technology that humanity might be able to exploit. It was a desperate gesture, like giving a knife to a child facing a trained warrior. But it was something. She encrypted the message using quantum entanglement, ensuring it would reach Earth instantly despite the vast distance. Then she added one final paragraph in English, a language she had grown to love for its flexibility and expressiveness. People of Earth. You do not know me, but I have watched you for decades. I have seen your wars and your peace, your hatred and your love, your destruction and your creation. The Corvathian Empire has judged you too dangerous to exist. In 96 hours, a fleet will arrive to eliminate your species. I am sorry. I am so deeply sorry. But if there is even the smallest chance you can survive, you deserve the opportunity to try. Use what I have given you. Fight with everything you have. Show the galaxy what humanity truly means. Signed, a friend among the stars. She pressed send. And then she sat down to wait for the security forces that would inevitably come for her. On Earth, the message arrived at 2:34 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time. It was received simultaneously by every major government, research institution, and military installation on the planet. Within minutes, secure communication lines around the world lit up like a web of lightning. President Sarah Chen of the World Council sat in the Emergency Command Center beneath Geneva, surrounded by leaders from every nation on Earth. The message played on the massive screen before them, its words burning into their consciousness. Around her, generals and scientists spoke in rapid, urgent tones, analyzing every piece of information the alien scientist had provided. Is this real? Asked Premier Alexei Volkov of the Russian Federation, his weathered face pale in the blue light of the displays. Our analysis confirms it, replied Dr. James Morrison, head of the Global Space Agency. The mathematical models, the physics, the technology described in this message, it all checks out. This is genuine alien science, far beyond anything we've developed. And if even half of what this message claims is true, we're facing an extinction-level threat. Chen stood and walked to the screen, staring at the technical specifications of the Corvathian warships. Each one was 3 kilometers long, armed with weapons that could crack continents. 5,000 of them. Against Earth's 47 combat-capable spacecraft and a collection of missiles designed to fight other humans, not an interstellar armada. The mathematics were brutal. Humanity should have no chance. Every military simulation they ran ended the same way, total annihilation within hours of the fleet's arrival. But as Chen looked around the room, she saw something in the eyes of her fellow leaders that surprised her. Not fear, exactly. Not panic. Something else. Determination. We've faced extinction before, she said quietly, her voice carrying through the sudden silence. Ice ages. Plagues. Volcanic winters. Asteroid impacts. Nuclear standoffs where we came within minutes of destroying ourselves. Every time, we survived. Not because we were the strongest or the smartest or the luckiest, but because we refused to give up. She turned to face the assembled leaders. This alien scientist gave us a gift. Information. Knowledge. A chance. And we're going to use it. Her voice grew stronger. I'm issuing emergency protocol Omega. Every military force, every research facility, every factory and laboratory on this planet is now dedicated to a single purpose: survival. We have 96 hours to prepare for the fight of our existence. Around the world, the machinery of human civilization shifted into a gear it had never used before. Old enemies set aside their weapons and joined hands. Resources that had been hoarded were shared freely. Technologies that had been kept secret were revealed and combined. The entire species moved with a unity that many had thought impossible. In underground complexes that officially didn't exist, engineers examined the Corvathian specifications and began to design countermeasures. In space, construction crews worked in shifts around the clock to modify satellites and space stations into weapons platforms. On the ground, factories retooled to produce equipment based on the alien scientists' information, pushing human manufacturing to its absolute limits. And in military command centers worldwide, strategists developed a plan that was either brilliant or insane. Probably both. It relied on humanity's greatest advantage. The Corvathians expected an easy victory. They thought they were cleansing primitives. They had no idea what was waiting for them. 72 hours into the preparation, President Chen stood before a camera in the command center. Behind her, screens showed the frantic activity happening across the planet. Spacecraft being armed. Weapons being positioned. Soldiers training on equipment that hadn't existed a week ago. She took a deep breath and began to speak. To the Corvathian Empire and all civilizations listening across the galaxy. This is President Sarah Chen of Earth, speaking for 8 billion human beings. We received your judgment. We understand your reasoning. You have looked at our history and decided we are too violent, too dangerous, too unpredictable to be allowed into the galactic community. She paused, her eyes hardening. You are right to fear us. The camera moved closer, capturing the intensity in her expression. You see our wars and assume we are mindless brutes. But you don't understand what those wars taught us. We learned to innovate under pressure. We learned to adapt or die. We learned that the only thing more dangerous than a human at peace is a human fighting for survival. She gestured to the screens behind her. You gave us 96 hours. Do you know what humans can do in 96 hours? We went from the first powered flight to landing on the moon in 66 years. We split the atom in the middle of a world war. We created vaccines for plagues in months instead of decades. When faced with extinction, we don't despair. We accelerate. Her voice dropped to something cold and deadly. You're sending 5,000 warships to sterilize our planet. You think this is overwhelming force. But you've made a critical error. You've given us warning. You've given us time. And most importantly, you've given us a reason to unite. Every human being on this planet now shares a single goal, making you regret this decision. She leaned forward, speaking directly into the camera. So come, Corvathian Empire. Bring your armada. Bring your planet-cracking weapons. Bring your 10,000-year-old technology and your absolute certainty of victory. We'll be waiting. And when your fleet burns in our sky, when your ships become debris floating in our orbit, when your survivors limp home to explain how they were defeated by primitives who've barely left their own planet, remember this: you chose this. You judged us without knowing us. You sentenced us without trial. You came to commit genocide. Her eyes blazed with fierce pride. You just signed your own annihilation. This is Earth's message to the galaxy. We are humanity. And we do not go quietly into extinction. We fight. We adapt. We survive. And we remember. See you in 24 hours. Humanity out. The transmission ended. And across the galaxy, thousands of civilizations watched in stunned silence as this tiny species from an unremarkable planet declared war on an empire that had ruled the stars for 10 millennia. In the Corvathian capital, High Archon Zelith watched the broadcast 3 times. Then he turned to his advisors and said simply, increase the fleet to 7,000 ships. I want overwhelming force. These humans will not intimidate us with words. But in his private chambers that night, Zelith stood at his window looking up at the stars, and for the first time in his 5,000-year life, he felt something he had not experienced in millennia. Doubt. The reckoning. The Corvathian armada emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system like a swarm of metal locusts. 7,000 warships, each one a masterpiece of engineering 3 kilometers long, their hulls gleaming with the distinctive silver-blue alloy that had conquered hundreds of worlds. High Archon Zelith stood on the bridge of the flagship Eternal Dominion, watching the distant sun that humans called Sol appear on the view screen. All vessels report ready status, announced Fleet Commander Karath, his forearms moving across holographic controls with practiced efficiency. Weapons charged. Shields at maximum. Planetary bombardment systems online. We can begin the cleansing operation immediately, High Archon. Zelith nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on the small blue dot that was barely visible even at maximum magnification. Earth. A planet that should have been nothing more than another footnote in the Corvathian records of sterilized worlds. Yet something about the humans' broadcast nagged at him. The absolute confidence in President Chen's voice. The certainty that seemed to defy all logic and mathematics. Proceed cautiously, he ordered. Deploy reconnaissance drones ahead of the main fleet. I want complete scans of every celestial body in this system. If the humans have prepared surprises, I want to know about them before we commit our forces. Karatha's expression showed confusion. High Archon, surely you don't believe their threats? They are primitives with barely functional spacecraft. Our advanced scouts detected only 47 vessels, none larger than 300 meters. They cannot possibly pose a threat to even a single ship of our armada. That is precisely what concerns me, Zelith replied quietly. Their mathematics should tell them resistance is futile. Yet they broadcast a declaration of war with absolute conviction. Either they're insane, or they know something we don't. The drones launched small spherical craft that could scan down to the molecular level. They spread throughout the solar system, their sensors probing every asteroid, every moon, every planet. The reports came back clean. No hidden fleets. No massive weapons platforms. Just a handful of human vessels clustered near their homeworld, pathetically small against the vastness of space. As expected, Karath said with satisfaction. Empty bravado, nothing more. Permission to advance the fleet, High Archon. Zelith studied the tactical display for another long moment. Everything appeared normal. Textbook, even. And yet that nagging doubt remained. Advance, he finally ordered. But maintain defensive formation. Something about this feels wrong. The Armada began its journey inward, 7,000 ships moving in perfect synchronization. They passed the orbit of Neptune, then Uranus, their sensors constantly scanning for threats. Nothing. Just the cold emptiness of space and the distant planets spinning in their eternal dance around the sun. As they crossed Saturn's orbit, Karath allowed himself a slight smile. Perhaps the humans realized the futility of resistance and fled. We detected several of their vessels departing the planet at maximum acceleration toward the outer system. Typical behavior from species facing extinction. Some always try to run. Perhaps, Zelith murmured, but his unease only grew stronger. They passed Jupiter, its massive gravitational field analyzed and discounted as a tactical factor. Mars loomed ahead, the red planet that humans had begun to colonize with their characteristic optimism. A few small settlements dotted its surface, already abandoned according to sensor readings. The path to Earth lay open. "All ships," Karath commanded, his voice resonating through the fleet communication network, "assume attack formation. On my mark, we will commence planetary bombardment. Target all major population centers simultaneously. Estimated time to complete sterilization, 4 hours." The Corvathian warships spread into a formation that had been perfected over thousands of years of conquest. A sphere of death that would surround the planet, allowing no escape and ensuring complete destruction. Their weapons began to charge, energy signatures building to levels that could shatter continents. And then Mars exploded. Not the planet itself, but the space around it. What had appeared to be abandoned settlements suddenly activated, revealing themselves as weapon emplacements of staggering power. Electromagnetic rail guns that accelerated projectiles to a significant fraction of light speed opened fire. Laser batteries that had been hidden beneath the Martian soil lanced out. And most devastating of all, the abandoned mining facilities revealed their true purpose as they launched thousands of missiles. But these were not ordinary missiles. Using the information provided by Dr. Methra, human engineers had worked frantically to develop weapons that could penetrate Corvathian shields. They couldn't match the aliens' technology, but they didn't need to. They just needed to understand it well enough to find its weaknesses. The missiles swarmed the outer edge of the Corvathian formation, each one carrying a specially designed payload. When they detonated, they didn't create explosions. Instead, they generated cascading waves of electromagnetic radiation at precisely calculated frequencies, the same frequencies that Corvathian shields struggled to dampen. The first wave of attacks claimed 600 ships. Their shields overloaded, leaving the vessels vulnerable to the kinetic projectiles and laser fire that followed microseconds later. The Corvathian warships that had seemed invincible dissolved into expanding clouds of superheated debris. "Evasive maneuvers!" Karath screamed, his forearms flying across the controls. "Return fire! All batteries, open fire on Mars!" The Armada responded with devastating force. Dozens of ships focused their weapons on the red planet, and the surface of Mars became a sea of molten rock and vapor. The hidden weapon emplacements were destroyed in seconds, vaporized by firepower that could crack worlds. But the damage was done. More importantly, the Corvathians' confidence was shaken. These primitives had hurt them. Actually hurt them. Ships that had been considered invincible had been destroyed by a species that supposedly couldn't threaten even a single vessel. "Status report," Zealith demanded, his voice cutting through the chaos on the bridge. 617 ships destroyed, an officer reported, his voice trembling. Another 253 showing various degrees of damage. "Hi Archon, how did they penetrate our shields?" Zealith stared at the tactical display, his mind racing. The answer was obvious and terrifying. Dr. Methra, the traitor scientist. She gave them our technical specifications. They didn't try to match our technology, they studied it and found ways to exploit its weaknesses. "But that should be impossible," Karath protested. "They've had only 96 hours. It takes our best scientists years to develop new weapon systems." "Apparently," Zealith said coldly, "humans work faster when facing extinction. Reform the fleet. We continue to Earth. But assume every piece of debris, every asteroid, every square meter of space could be hiding a weapon." The Armada proceeded, now moving with cautious precision instead of confident swagger. They passed the orbit of Mars, entering the inner solar system. Earth grew larger on the view screens, a jewel of blue and white that seemed far too beautiful to destroy. And then the asteroids attacked. The asteroid belt had always been there, of course. The Corvathian scans had noted it as a navigational hazard of minimal concern. What they hadn't detected was that humans had been mining those asteroids for decades, hollowing them out and filling them with equipment. Now those asteroids moved, guided by hidden thrusters. They adjusted their orbits with impossible precision, throwing themselves into the path of the Corvathian fleet. But they weren't just projectiles. Each one contained nuclear warheads, kinetic kill vehicles, and more of those shield-disrupting devices. The explosions lit up space like a chain of supernovas. The Corvathians tried to destroy the incoming asteroids, but there were too many, and they moved too unpredictably. Human pilots, hidden in shielded bunkers deep within the rock, guided their weapons on suicide runs that would make their names immortal. Captain Maria Santos sat in her cockpit buried in the heart of an asteroid designated Chala 7. Her screen showed the Corvathian fleet growing closer, their weapons tearing apart other asteroids around her. She had volunteered for this mission knowing she would never see Earth again. Her family had evacuated to the deep underground shelters. If humanity survived, they would live. That was enough. "This is Chala 7, she transmitted on the secure channel. "I have a clean approach vector on a Corvathian command carrier. Engaging final acceleration." "Confirmed, Chala 7, came the response from Earth Command. "Godspeed, Captain." Maria smiled and pushed the thrusters to maximum. Her asteroid accelerated toward the massive enemy vessel, too fast now for their point defense systems to track effectively. She thought about her daughter, 8 years old, who wanted to be an astronaut. Maybe, if they survived this, humanity would finally reach the stars. Not as conquerors, but as equals. "For Earth," she whispered, and triggered the detonation sequence. Chala 7 exploded with the force of 50 nuclear weapons, its blast amplified by the confined space within the hollowed asteroid. The Corvathian carrier's shields tried to compensate, but they had been weakened by previous attacks. The vessel split in half, its internal atmosphere explosively decompressing, killing 15,000 Corvathian soldiers in seconds. Across the battlefield, similar stories played out. Human pilots sacrificing themselves to take down vessels 1,000 times their size. Each death bought Earth more time, took away more of the Corvathians' numerical advantage. By the time the Armada reached lunar orbit, they had lost another 900 ships. The Moon itself opened fire, revealing weapons systems hidden during its colonization. The Corvathians destroyed them within minutes, but not before losing 300 more vessels to the withering barrage. Zelith watched his fleet dwindle with growing horror. They still outnumbered the humans tremendously. They still possessed overwhelming firepower. But the mathematics had changed. What should have been a 4-hour sterilization operation had become a bloody siege, and they hadn't even reached Earth yet. "High Archon," Karath said quietly, "perhaps we should withdraw and request additional forces." "No," Zelith replied, his voice hard. "We commit. We end this now, before these humans teach the entire galaxy that the Corvathian Empire can be challenged. All ships, assume close planetary assault formation. Prepare for final bombardment." The remaining 5,000 ships moved toward Earth, their weapons fully charged, their shields reinforced. Whatever tricks the humans had prepared, whatever traps they had laid, the Corvathians would overwhelm them through sheer devastating force. And then Earth herself entered the battle. The planet's orbital space erupted with activity. What had appeared on scans as communications satellites and weather stations transformed. Panels fell away, revealing weapon systems. Space stations that supposedly housed scientific research suddenly bristled with rail guns and missile pods. Even the ancient International Space Station, kept operational more for historical sentiment than practical use, revealed itself as a weapons platform. But the real surprise came from the ships. Those 47 human vessels that had seemed so pathetically inadequate suddenly divided, each one splitting into multiple craft. They had been disguised carrier vessels, hiding their true numbers. Hundreds of smaller fighters poured into space, each one piloted by humans who had trained for this moment their entire lives. Lieutenant Commander Jackson Hayes led his squadron in a dive toward the Corvathian formation. His fighter was barely 30 meters long, cobbled together from parts of decommissioned military jets and experimental spacecraft, powered by a fusion reactor that was probably going to explode if he pushed it too hard. He pushed it too hard anyway. "All right, people," he transmitted to his squadron, "remember the training. We're gnats to them, too small for their main weapons to track effectively. Getting close, target the shield generators, and get out before they can swat you. And if you can't get out..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Every pilot knew the score. They were flying bombs with delusions of being fighters. But they were humanity's bombs, and they would make every second count. The space battle that followed would be analyzed by military historians for generations. The Corvathians had superior technology, better weapons, stronger shields. But humans had desperation, creativity, and a willingness to trade lives for objectives that the more civilized Corvathians found incomprehensible. Human fighters dove between Corvathian vessels, firing weapons at point-blank range. When their ammunition ran out, they used their ships as kinetic projectiles. Orbital platforms that ran out of missiles used their remaining power to fire lasers until their systems overloaded and exploded. Even the debris from destroyed human craft became weapons, seeded with explosives that detonated when Corvathian shields tried to deflect them. Admiral Chen Wei commanded the defense from the repurposed space station Unity 1. His screen showed the battle in real time, each loss a name he recognized, a person he had trained with or commanded. But he couldn't afford to mourn. Not yet. Ground batteries, prepare firing solution Gamma, he ordered. Target their command ship. All remaining orbital platforms, coordinated strike on my mark. Across Earth's surface, massive electromagnetic rail guns powered up. They had been built in secret over decades, hidden in mountains and beneath oceans, powered by entire cities' worth of electricity. Now they aimed at the sky and prepared to fire. Mark, Chen commanded. The rail guns fired simultaneously. Projectiles the size of trains accelerated to velocities that turned them into relativistic weapons. They climbed through the atmosphere, their kinetic energy so intense that air molecules turned to plasma in their wake. Orbital weapons platforms added their fire, creating a wall of destruction focused on a single target. Eternal Dominion shields flared brilliant white as they absorbed the incoming fire. For a moment, it seemed they would hold. Then cracks appeared in the energy field. The shields buckled. And then they failed. The projectile struck the flagship with apocalyptic force. 3 kilometers of advanced warship crumpled like paper. Internal explosions rippled through its length as systems overloaded and fuel reserves ignited. Zealith had just enough time to feel profound shock before his ship tore itself apart around him. The destruction of the flagship sent a shock wave through the Corvathian formation. For the first time in their 10,000-year history, a High Archon had been killed in battle. The impossible had happened. Commander Karath, now the ranking officer, stared at the empty space where Eternal Dominion had been. Around him, status reports flooded in. 4,000 ships remaining. Ammunition reserves at 60%. Shield generators showing stress damage across the fleet. And the humans were still fighting. All ships, he transmitted, his voice hollow, immediate withdrawal to beyond lunar orbit. Reform defensive positions. We need to reassess our situation. As the Corvathian fleet retreated, humanity didn't pursue. They couldn't. Their losses had been catastrophic. Of the hundreds of fighters that had launched, fewer than 50 remained operational. The orbital platforms were destroyed or depleted. The ground-based rail guns needed hours to recharge. Mars was a smoking ruin. The asteroid bases were gone. But they had done the impossible. They had forced the mighty Corvathian Empire to retreat. President Chen stood in the command center, watching the enemy fleet withdraw. Around her, exhausted officers allowed themselves brief moments of celebration. They had won the first battle. But everyone knew the war was far from over. Casualty reports, she asked quietly. 230,000 military personnel, General Morrison replied, his voice thick with grief. Another 100,000 civilians in the colonies and orbital facilities. Most of the Mars settlements. Significant damage to lunar infrastructure. Chen closed her eyes. 330,000 dead. 330,000 people who had sacrificed everything for humanity's survival. The price of defiance was paid in blood. And the Corvathians, she asked. Best estimate, 3,000 ships destroyed or damaged beyond combat effectiveness. High Archon Zealith confirmed killed. Their fleet is in disarray. Morrison paused. Madam President, we actually hurt them. We made them bleed. Chen opened her eyes and looked at the tactical display. 4,000 Corvathian warships still surrounded Earth. Still enough to destroy the planet 10 times over. But now they knew humanity could fight back. Now they understood the price of underestimating a species fighting for its survival. Open all galactic frequencies, Chen ordered. It's time to send our second message. When her face appeared on screens across the galaxy, she looked exactly like what she was, a leader who had just commanded the bloodiest battle in human history. Exhausted, grief-stricken, but unbowed. To the Corvathian Empire and all civilizations watching, you came to exterminate us. You brought 7,000 warships to crush a species that barely knows how to leave its own planet. And we destroyed 3,000 of them. She let that sink in. 3,000 vessels, each one supposedly invincible, each one representing centuries of your advanced technology. Destroyed by primitives who've been spacefaring for less than a century. Her expression hardened. You want to know how? Because we're human. Because when you threaten our families, our children, our future, we don't calculate odds. We don't surrender to superior force. We fight. We adapt. We learn. And we win, or we die trying. She leaned forward. But here's what should terrify you. We're not done learning. Every ship you lost, we're studying. Every piece of wreckage floating in our orbit, we're reverse engineering. Every tactic you used, we're analyzing and preparing counters for. You came here expecting an easy genocide. Instead, you're giving us a masterclass in advanced warfare. And we're very quick learners. Chen's voice dropped to something cold and final. So here's your choice, Corvathians. You can withdraw now, admit that you failed to exterminate us, and face the political consequences at home. Or you can continue this fight, throw your remaining ships at our defenses, and see how many more thousands of your people die before you finally break through. Either way, you've already lost. Because even if you destroy Earth, we've shown the entire galaxy that you can be beaten. That your 10,000-year empire is vulnerable. That humans, despite being primitive and violent and dangerous, are even more dangerous than you feared. She smiled, and it was the expression of a predator. You judged us without knowing us. You sentenced us without trial. You came to commit genocide. And we made you pay a price that will haunt your empire for the next 10,000 years. This is humanity's final message: we're here. We're not going anywhere. And if you want us gone, you'll have to pay for every inch in blood and metal and broken dreams. The choice is yours. But choose quickly. Because while you're deciding, we're building more weapons. The transmission ended. And across the galaxy, the political landscape shifted. Civilizations that had cowered before the Corvathian Empire for millennia suddenly wondered if they, too, could resist. The myth of invincibility had been shattered. And it had been shattered by the species everyone had dismissed as too primitive to matter. Commander Karath sat in what remained of the fleet's command structure, staring at Earth on his view screen. That beautiful blue planet that had cost them so dearly. His orders from the capital were clear: complete the mission regardless of cost. The Empire could not afford to appear weak. But as he looked at the remaining ships under his command, many damaged, all low on ammunition, facing an enemy that seemed to grow stronger with every hour, Karath wondered something he had never wondered before. What if they were wrong? What if humanity wasn't a cancer to be cut out, but something else? Something the galaxy needed, even if it didn't know it yet? He pushed the thought away. He was a soldier. He followed orders. But doubt, once planted, grows like a seed in fertile ground. The battle for Earth wasn't over. But humanity had proven something that would echo through the cosmos for generations to come. They had proven that courage, creativity, and sheer stubborn refusal to accept extinction could challenge even the mightiest empire in the known universe. And somewhere in the depths of space, Dr. Methra watched the battle's aftermath from her prison cell and allowed herself a small smile. She had given humanity a chance. And they had seized it with both hands and refused to let go. The galaxy would never be the same.